You're listening to Season 5 of the Devoted Dreamers podcast. Welcome, Dreamer. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Merritt Ansa, and this is the podcast where we talk about our God-shaped dreams, the ones we're pursuing, hoping to pursue, or waiting on God to reveal. I don't know you yet, but I hope to, and my hope with this podcast is to help you move from uncertainty to action so that your life might sing, that it might sing praises to God for your good and His glory, because He made you for big things. But the more I talk with women about their dreams, the more I understand there's a battle within. Is it okay to be ambitious, to dream, to do something with our skills, gifts, and experiences? If you're struggling with this, don't listen to me. Go read God's Word, specifically Ephesians 1, and let the God of the universe remind you that you were chosen for a purpose, in order that you might live for the praise of His glory. Sure, you might feel some fear, anxiety, insecurity walking forward in your dream, but don't let those things stop you. We all feel them to some extent, and you cannot let those feelings, or the voices that tell you you have no business dreaming this dream, you cannot let them win, because you are a daughter of the King. And that's why we're having this conversation. I pray it's what you hear today in this episode. Thank you so much for joining in. As always, you'll find the show notes at merrittansa.com/podcast. And please connect with me and the community of devoted dreamers in our Facebook group or over on Instagram at merrittjo. And now, here's today's episode. Hello, devoted dreamers, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is episode 108, and I'm super excited to bring to you someone that I was actually introduced to through my mother-in-law on Facebook. Like, how often does that happen? Maybe all the time, but I've got April Matt here, and she is the director of Along the Way in Pennsylvania. And so some of you have probably never heard of this organization, and hopefully some of you have, but Along the Way serves single moms by providing high quality, affordable in-home childcare so that they can go to work or go to school or get the training that they need to support their families. So I'm super excited for you to hear from April about her dream and just a bit about her. She's a wife and a mom of what she calls one spunky daughter. I'm curious, how old is she, April?
She's going to be 10, but she's totally going on 20.
Okay, sweet. So they have lived in the Souderton, Pennsylvania area April's lived there for most of her life. She's got a lot of nonprofit experience and was once a single mom, so I'm sure there's a connection to why she's a part of this organization. Mm-hmm. But April, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm excited to have you. Yeah,
me too.
And it's funny, we just talked for 25 minutes or more. I'm like, we've got to hit record on this. Like, I think you and I could go on and on for hours. So anyway, will you just get us into the conversation? What is your God-shaped dream?
Sure. Well, I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about Along the Way first, because it's kind of part of the story anyway. But I think I can be a little bit flighty, so my dream changes a lot. And I think things for me, I'm kind of a little bit spontaneous, and I kind of have a little bit of ADHD, like actual diagnosis, not just saying it to be like, oh, hi, I have ADHD. No, I literally do. But I think my biggest thing and the biggest dream for me that's kind of just been sitting with me for a long period of time has been just to create safe spaces for people of all ages. And I know that seems kind of broad, but my husband and I worked with our youth at our church, and I've just gotten a lot of feedback from people, numerous people of all different ages, of all different walks of life, that will come into my house and be like, I feel like I could stay here forever. Like, it's so comfortable here. I feel like I've had strangers on the street actually come up to me and say, like, I've never told anybody this ever. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm the steward of like, I'm going to be stewarding this this very important information that you're sharing with me that you've never shared with anybody else. So, yeah, I think and that kind of like, for me, I feel that's what the gospel calls us to. I feel that that's like the radicalness of it. I feel that, like when I say like every single person, I'm talking about everyone, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the murderer, the stripper, the Muslim, the gay person, everybody. Like I feel called to witness to people. And I'm not talking about like, I'm going to witness and share the gospel. Like that goes without being said for me. It's just to witness you, to see you, to hear you, to create space for you. I will cry because it's obviously super passionate for me. And I think that goes into like why I do the things that I do, why along the way, the nonprofit that I have helped started with two other really amazing women, Jane Reagan and Chris Moyer, why we started this, why they started it first. And then I kind of jumped on. They did a thing called the Cultural Index, where they were looking for a specific type of person to round out the organization, someone who is like a trailblazer, like visionary, can kind of get things up and running. And, God brought me to them. And so then along the way was kind of being birthed over here while I was kind of going through some of my own stuff. And, God brought us together to create this organization, which kind of goes into my passions, which is providing childcare services for single moms working nights and weekends. And so the three of us knew we wanted to do something with women, and we just weren't sure, we thought it would be something more like, like a resource center, or teach them how to like dress for success, or, things like that. And before I came on, Jane and Chris met up with a lot of people within our community and just asked a lot of questions. And it kept coming back to, that's really nice, you want to do that, but that people need to go to work. People can't dress for success or dress for an interview until they're, they have childcare, and they can't get to work if they don't have secure childcare. And so within one day, they heard that numerous times, and they were like, okay, God's calling us into childcare. Like, we want to work with women. But soon, very quickly, we recognized like, oh no, the way to a woman's heart is through her children. And I think you know this just as well as I do, being a mom. Yeah, if somebody's not taking care of my baby well, or if somebody is taking care of my baby well, then it's very easy for me to build that relationship with them. And then, one thing leads to another. And hopefully we're supporting people more holistically than we're not just doing childcare, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. So, I just want to make sure you covered all this like good stuff I highlighted.
No, let's talk about, I could talk about poverty, the trauma, the grief. Like, my heart is super passionate about those things too, which kind of all goes to, we work with women in poverty. And so we work with women who have been extremely traumatized. Like I said, like we said earlier in my bio, I was a single mom, and my own personal story is one of, I married a sex addict. I had no idea what that was. I could totally talk all day long about sexuality, and issues that come up with that just because we don't talk about it. And I had no idea what that was. I just was trying to follow God and be a good wife and do all the things I'm supposed to. And it just kept getting crazier, and it became abusive emotionally, physically, mentally, sexually, all of those ways. And one thing led to another, and I thought we were going to get divorced, and I got pregnant instead, which was kind of crazy because I had some medical issues and I didn't think that I could get pregnant. So it was a big question mark to God. Like, wait, what? I thought, no, a baby. Oh, okay. I have to, okay. It was like that. And so after I had my daughter, her name is Marigold, like the flower. And after I had her, it was about 8 months later, and I was served divorce papers. Now, mind you, my ex-husband has a lot of trauma from his childhood. He had just abuse in his childhood, just neglect in his childhood, poverty in his childhood. I could do like a whole episode. I could do a whole case study on my poor ex-husband. But he's still in my daughter's life. He's doing the best that he can. And he still, brings a host of issues. Like, don't we all bring a host of issues into our relationships and life? But that I moved home into my mom and dad's into my old high school bedroom. I lost virtually everything and moved home as a 30-year-old. And, you know, at 30, you're not starting over with an 8-month-old. Like, it's not what your hopes and dreams and wishes were. But there's this Gungor song that it's called Beautiful Things. And one of the I guess lyrics that's super important to me is that he makes beautiful things out of the dust. And I just remember having a conversation with my grandmother, who did prison ministry and was just like one of the most godly, amazing women ever. She was just a powerhouse. And she, sometimes God will bring everything down to the ground. Like he will destroy, not necessarily he will destroy it, but like life, things just get destroyed and he will rebuild it better than you ever could imagine. Like, think of it like the foundation of your home has a crack in it and you really want to save it because it's your home and it's really special and it's all these things, but we have to take it down and we have to fix the foundation and we're going to rebuild this house. So it was kind of like that general idea. And of course, when you're in the throes of that, you're like, I don't want to hear that. Like, that's not what I'm interested in hearing. I want God to fix my marriage. I want him to restore it. And, you know, growing up in church and stuff, that's what you like. God is a God of restoration, but sometimes it doesn't look the way that you think it's going to look. And so my story did not look the way that I thought it would look. And prior to that, like right leading up to that part of my life being destroyed, I had a friend die. He was ejected from a car, and I sat with my girlfriend in the ICU and we decided, you know, essentially what organs she was going to donate and taking him off of life support. And then a month to the day, a very good friend of mine was in an accident at work and he's now quadriplegic. And just walking through all of that with those two friends and then going through the experience of, you know, the divorce and everything that came with that relationship. It was almost 10 years of just craziness. And then I met my husband and he has just been just a really helpful person when it comes to putting boundaries in place. And he's just helped me so much to grow into who I am today. And then I lost 5 people in 5 years. So my dad, both of my grandmothers who essentially raised me, my uncle, my sister, I have a handicapped sister and she passed away. And my father-in-law then passed away. So it's actually 6 people in 5 years. And so, and then also starting a nonprofit in the middle of all of that. Wow, so, God, I just lost where I'm going with all this, but that's essentially my story in a nutshell, which has kind of brought me to like wanting to create these places and talk about trauma and talk about sexuality and talk about grief and how to like seek God in all of that and not lose your faith somehow. And so that was a lot. So
that's okay. No, that's great. That helps us know a little bit about you exactly. And what drives you. Because one of the things that you said in your notes is that we're trained in CPR, but not trained in grief.
No, we're not.
And that hits us all at some point in our lives. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I don't know how that connects to along the way. I guess just that a lot of women who are single mothers have dealt with a lot of really hard things.
Yeah, I mean, the moms specifically that we deal with have dealt with generational poverty. And you know what? In poverty, we speak different languages. Like, I'm middle class. I'm assuming you're probably middle class or upper middle class. And the rest of the world essentially operates at that. Like, if you go to the bank, they speak in middle class, upper class, like terminologies. You go to school, they speak like that. Women and men and people in poverty, they speak a different language. They have about 400 to 600 words in their vocabulary. So for them, a lot is based out of body language. And so they're watching you and they're looking at you. And then maybe people use big words and you don't even, I mean, I take for granted sometimes the things that I say and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe people aren't understanding not that I'm like so educated and look at me, but I just don't think about those things. And once I started working with people in poverty, my entire worldview shifted, like it it was hard because then I started to hear, I especially around issues around racism, and there's people have stereotypes for a reason. Like, there's a reason people like think in those terms. But just to hear myself saying certain things, I'm like, I need to be more gentle and more compassionate towards some of this, because I was living my life like this, and now I've kind of like become awoke to this other stuff. And how do I serve these people and love them well? And isn't this what Jesus was doing? And like trying to like navigate all of that and put that together, and not completely destroy everything that I've ever like helped here. It's been like kind of a wild ride. But yeah, to go back to that idea of trauma and grief, and the fact that we are trained in CPR. I'm trained in pediatric CPR I just finished getting my recertification. So I know how to help a choking baby or a person who's, needs the defibrillator. Like, I can do all of that, but so many of us aren't trained in grief, and every one of us from childhood till the day that we die will deal with grief in one way or another. We lose people, and it's not just about dying. It's not about, our cat died or our grandmother died. It's about our relationship ended, or this relationship that I have with my mom that I want it to look like this, but it is this. Like, I have to grieve the loss of what I hoped and wished something would be. Like, so grief goes into like that. Like, we all experience it, yet we don't know how to sit with each other. We don't know how to listen to each other. In fact, we want to swipe it away and push it, like, go cry in your bedroom. How many times do we say that to our children? So we're teaching our children at an early age that people don't want to see you cry. People don't want to see you be vulnerable. People don't want to see you sad, and that can be traumatizing. Now you're an adult and you're not dealing with these things. Anyway, I could go on and on about that.
Yeah, so forgive me for not knowing the connection here, but like, how does Along the Way work with people in that space? Like, do you guys do some of that care, or do you refer?
Yeah, so we're a really small, tiny grassroots organization, and so we are kind of learning as we go. Nobody else is really doing what we're doing, so we don't kind of have like a template to follow. We've kind of just been holding it very loosely and being like, okay, God, this is your baby. Where are we going? Oh, somehow we're going over here. Okay. I don't know anything about that. So yeah, when I started meeting with the moms and starting to understand things, we have a large population of the people in our organization that are African American. So, and I'm white. And so that was an interesting place for me to start kind of navigating. Like, I started to recognize how I do have predispositions towards certain things. And how do I, just move through that, and to be more open and understanding and hearing and listening. And when it comes to trauma and it comes to grief, all of my moms, they start to open up and to share their stories. There's sexual abuse, there's physical abuse, there's abandonment issues, there's neglect issues there's the poverty issue, there's the race issues. Like, it's just been so amazing for me to just come to them and to go back to that idea of creating a safe space to say, like, this is a non-judgmental space for you to share and to be open and to be vulnerable. And I'm going to do the best that I can to honor that and to respect that and to walk through this with you and to just be Jesus. Like, I don't feel like I have to have this special Bible verse or this special, like book that I need to go through with them, but we can just be together and sit here. And I pray before every meeting to just like let Jesus radiate through me. Like, let me show your love. Let me show your understanding. Let me show your peace. Let me show that, like, we're all created in your image and we are all your children. And just, direct me in what to say, what to do, how to honor, how to, maybe I have to say a tough line. There's times where I've had to, call Child Protection Services and put a report in. I'm a mandated reporter. Like, so these are all things that, when we were dreaming this, I wasn't thinking about, I was like, we're going to help people. We're going to love people. It's going to be amazing. And, there's been really tough situations too that I've had to deal with. And, but it's been incredible. And God has been Jane, Chris, and I, the three of us, we meet every Friday, and we are constantly in a state of like, okay, we can't it's not about honoring man. It's not about how men think of us. It's not about what they want us to do. We have to hand it back to you, God. And we talk about Psalm 46, and it just says, we're not to focus on, I will actually read it because I have it in front of me. Do not put your trust in princes and human beings who cannot save. When the spirit departs, they return to the ground on the very day their plans come to nothing. And so just going back to that, like, we're not here where I just have to give it back to God. Like, I have to just trust that he knows what's best, and he will direct us in what we need to do.
I love that you brought that verse to my attention, because I looked at that this morning and I was like, oh, that's so good. As a people pleaser and someone who wants to do all the right things from a worldly perspective, it's like, oh yeah, no, do not trust in man. We are but dust.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it really puts things back into perspective. And I know we briefly talked about this too. Like, 12-step community is really big for me. Like I said, my first husband was a sex addict. I then married an alcoholic, and I'm a codependent. And so I know I'm throwing out a lot of labels, and I'm not someone who really is like a big label person, because I think it can box you in and you can get stuck. But it's very helpful for me to understand, like, okay, if this is who you are and this is what happens, then how can we move forward and be healthy? And so something that 12-step has really taught me was, like, step 1, 2, and 3 is about, we admit we're powerless and our lives have become unmanageable. 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And 3, made a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And so those 3 things, I bring that into everything. I bring that in when I'm meeting with my moms. I bring that into, like, what are we doing as an organization along the way? Like, are we making good choices? Like, are we trusting God? Are we listening? Like, what, as the 3 of us meet and kind of think through stuff, we, at the end of the day, like, I am powerless. I don't have control. And like you said, I too am a people pleaser. That's part of being codependent, not having healthy boundaries, letting people, different things like that. Like, I got to go back, circle through again. Like, my life, I am powerless and life can be unmanageable. And I need God to be in control. I have to surrender over and over, day in and day out. And, no matter what it is, whether it's the grief or the trauma, or it's like, oh, I don't have my degree is not in social work and childcare, or, any like early childhood. My degree is in film. So, I love that old saying where, like, God equips the call. God equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped. And so I have to go back to that, because I can become really self-conscious and feel, it goes back to that verse, Psalm 146, like, I'll fall right back into, does everybody like me? Did I do it right? Is Jane and Chris, are they mad at me? Did I do the right thing? Are the moms mad? I can get into that cycle very quickly. And it's so helpful to have the 12 steps, to have those Bible verses, to have people in my life, like my husband and Jane and Chris and other people, to be like, April, it's not about man. It doesn't matter what those people think. So that really helped.
So would you say that's kind of been like your biggest struggle just internally in following this?
Oh yeah. Biggest struggle for me, self-esteem, fear of man, and worry gets thrown in there too. So I can get on that rocking chair and rock back and forth, worrying and stressing out. And again, when I take it back to those 12 steps, or I take it back to those Bible verses, or I surrender to God and just give up my rights. Give up my rights to God and say, like, this is your organization. This is your meeting with this mom. This is this with my daughter. Like, she goes back and forth to my husband's house, and that can be scary sometimes, because I'm out of control. I don't know what's happening there. I have to trust that she's safe, and so I have to go back to those places over and over again and continue to surrender that stuff. And that's kind of like my mantra that I kind of, I mean, don't get me wrong here, people. Like there are weeks that go by that I am fully in my own strength. I'm like, look at me, look at my ego is gigantic, and I have to be, something always happens that, whether it's someone calls me out or, I don't know. I can't even think of an example right now, but I definitely, there are days I have to, if I'm not, working those steps or working those, thinking through those Bible verses or having that accountability in my life, I can get on the rocking chair, I can get on the merry-go-round, or I can start really beating myself up. Another part of my story too in self-esteem was that I had a gymnastics coach tell me I was fat when I was like 11, and it turned out I had a cyst on my ovary the size of a basketball, and I had to get surgery to get it removed. But he did some major damage to me in terms of trauma. He embarrassed me in front of the entire team. He had me jump on the springboard to prove how fat I was. I mean, this was like straight up abusive. And, in 1992 or whatever. And my mom is mortified to this day because she's like, I gave permission for him to tell you to, and she thought that he was just going to talk to me about, like food and how to be healthy. And she had no idea any of that even happened. And I kept that from her because the shame was so great. And, shame can do crazy things. And so for me, self-esteem and knowing who I am in the Lord, it's a struggle for me. There's some times where people are like, well, you hurt God when you say A, B, and C about yourself. And I'm like, okay, but I still believe it. Like, that's hard. Sometimes that's hard for me to tangibly put into place. But I have to go back to like, I was created in his image. He created me. I am perfect, whether I have 10 extra pounds on me or not. And that's not like when I'm working with the moms, like I see how beautiful each of them are. And I know sometimes it's a little cliche, like, oh, you're beautiful inside and out. Like, no, like you really are. Like you are a beautiful person. You're incredibly resourceful. Like, as I'm talking to a single mom, I'm like, you're a single mom. You've been living in poverty. You've clothed, bathed, taken care of, gotten to work, figured out, like your car broke down and you figured out how to get to work, get your kids where you need to go. You're incredibly resourceful. Like you're able to do things that I've never even thought about or even had to. And honestly, if I was in your situation, wouldn't be able to do it. Like you need to add that to your resume in a very creative way.
Right. I love that.
Seriously, like, and I'm really good at encouraging. So like, I know that's something that I'm good at. So to be able to be in this position with the women of along the way and to be like, all right, girls, like you're beautiful. Like you can do this. I know that you have it. To see their faces beam. And like some of these women no one's told them that, like ever. Yeah. Like no one's told them like, I'll cry. Like I'm going to cry. Like you're a good mom. Who's telling them that? Yeah. Sorry.
Sounds like you are.
Right? Yeah. Like, I mean, I might be the first person that said that.
Well, and I just want to I'll let you get a breath and I will insert, I made this note before we started talking that my theme for this month is that because of your identity in Christ, you already have great value and worth.
Yeah.
And I hear that is what you are communicating to them. And then you're also providing for a really practical need.
Yeah, of course.
So I love that. I love what you guys are doing. And actually, this might be a great place to talk about for anyone local to, what would you call your area? Kind of like,
like
it's Western Pennsylvania, like, Souderton. Yeah, like I know you guys are east of Philly or west of Philly.
Outside of Philly? Yeah, we're
outside of Philly. Yeah. So I want you to talk about your event that you have coming up on the 23rd, because anybody listening from that area, you could get a chance to go.
Sure, absolutely. And I want to say one thing before we jump to that. I feel like
totally.
this is, I want you, like, I have caregivers that are going to the house, are doing the same stuff for the mom. So it's not all about me. Just checking my
Of
ego.
course.
And like, they're
Of
doing the same
course.
thing, which is like really amazing. I have 10 incredible staff that are going into the homes and loving the kids and the moms. And that I even get to mentor and just to build into into our relationship too. And so that's, God has been so good, and it's been such a blessing to that. So I just wanted to add that piece too, as well.
I was kind of wondering logistically, how did this all happen?
Oh yeah.
So
We'll circle back to that. But our event is Saturday, February 23rd, excuse me, from 12 to 4. It's at Harleysville Rental, which is on 113 by the YMCA, if you know where I'm talking about. And our plan is like, the holidays are over, winter is setting in. We want to play some games together. It's a family event. We can eat pizza, shake off the winter blues. You're also supporting a nonprofit, so it's a win-win. But we're going to be playing board games. We're going to have a raffle. We have a bunch of people within our community that have donated just incredible things from their shops or their organizations or their services, and we're going to have a photo booth and food. So it's pretty exciting, and I hope a lot of people come and that they just have fun. It's just going to be a time of fun, and of course we're going to share about along the way and what we do, and we're working on putting a video together and getting all of our marketing stuff up to snuff. So that's exciting. But our giveaway that we're doing with you guys is that we want to give 5 tickets away to our first annual fundraiser. And so tickets are $5 for adults, $3 for children. You can find more information out at our website, which is alongthewaypa.org/events. So there you go.
Sweet. Okay. And so I'm really excited that you guys are doing this. Like I said to you earlier, like we would come.
I love it.
We were going to be there.
I love it.
But so for the giveaway, so if you're listening to this prior to Saturday, February 9th, you still have time to enter. And we're going to make the deadline midnight on Saturday the 9th Eastern. And basically either go to my Instagram, which is MerrittJO, or to April's, which is... What's yours?
My personal one.
Yeah.
Koopy Coop 8.
Koopy Coop 8. Okay. We will post an image in both of those accounts where you can just follow me and April, and then tag a couple of friends and share the love about Along the Way and about this episode and the event coming up. Yeah. And then that's exciting that 5 people will get to go to your event. And hey, if you're listening to this after the 9th, go buy tickets and show up.
Yeah, come. Please come. It'll be fun.
Yes.
It's going to be fun.
That sounds really, really fun. I only have one child that's maybe game age, but yeah. Hey, maybe we can go to your second annual.
There you go. That would be great. And we are going to have we're going to have things for like the little kids to like go fish. We're going to have a table of like simple games that kids can play, or mom and dad can play with the kids, or grandmom, whoever comes with you guys.
Great.
So hopefully we're going to get all ages, from like the super crazy gamers that like are, into it, to, a little kid who, Uno is, going to work for them. Mm-hmm. So that's hopefully we're going to try to capture everybody in there. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to, you've mentioned a couple of verses that have, at least that one, Psalm 146. Where are there some other verses that you just really cling to in this process?
Yes. So Isaiah 58, 9-12, and specifically in the Message version, I just think it's it's beautiful. Like I feel like it's one of those, I'm not big into life verses, but it's a life verse.
Yeah. I feel like can you read it for us? Do you have it in front of you?
I think it's also like my family's motto too. Like I feel like it's our, like it should be like in a giant plaque at our front door. So yeah. So it's it has a header to it, and so it's a full life in the emptiest of places. If you get rid of unfair practices, quit blaming victims, quit gossiping about other people's sins. If you are generous with the hungry and start giving yourself to the down and out, our lives will begin to glow in the darkness. Your shadowed lives will be bathed in sunlight. I will always show you where to go. I'll give you a full life in the emptiest of places, firm muscles, strong bones. You'll be like a well-watered garden, a gurgling spring that never runs dry. You'll use you'll use the old rubble of past lives to build anew, rebuild the foundations from out of your past. And I feel like this is what God has done. Like, this is what God is doing. This is what he has done. And I know that he will continue to do this. And it's fairly simple. I mean, you just have to get rid of unfair practices and quit blaming victims and quit gossiping about other people's sin.
That's all. Yeah.
Be generous with the hungry and give to the down and out. I know it's not easy for everybody to do. Some people are more predisposed to be effortlessly give like that, but
well, and empowered by the Holy Spirit. Like, I know God's not saying like go do,
but
go do in my power.
Yeah, I feel like I'll give you a full life in the emptiest of places. Like, what an incredible. And it's big for me because I've been there. I've been in the emptiest place ever.
Yeah. And it tells us that he knows those places exist in our lives, and he sees it and wants to meet that need. And by his grace, oh my goodness, he's meeting that through you and your team and and your organization. So that's really, it's really fun to see. Well, I would love to hear, is there just a piece of advice that you would give to other women who are trying to figure out what their dream is or take their next step toward it?
Oh, geez. I guess I like the idea. I guess let's talk about the stepping out in faith. I mean, I remember in the beginning stages in the beginning part of Along the Way, it took us about 2 years to raise money, figure out the all the logistics. And let me just tell you, running a nonprofit, you think it's going to be super sexy work. It's not. And so if you're going into it thinking like, oh, this is going to be so awesome, it's hard. It's really, really hard, but it's really, 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 really life-giving, rewarding to see God. Like, I was not seeing God's hand the way that I am seeing it today. And it's because, Jane, Chris, and I stepped out in faith. And it took us about 2 years to raise the money, to ask our friends and our family, can you give to this? We're going to do this. Do you believe in us? Like, it's really putting yourself out there, and that can be really scary. Like, what if people are like, I don't believe in you and I don't believe in this? And that can be really it's really a vulnerable place to be, to ask people for that. And so I get how hard that can be. But I would say, like, just Nike says, just do it. Like, there's a reason that's kind of their like catchphrase, because it's rewarding and it's life-changing and it's hard and it's beautiful, and God builds things out of the dust, and God puts you in places that you least expected, and you learn so many. I've learned so much in the past 5 years. Incredible amounts in the past 5 years. And in the beginning stages, I remember Jane and I went down to in Philadelphia, the beautiful library down there, and we went in there to look at like how to get a grant, and we were praying about like, okay, we needed $75,000 to start our pilot program, and we were almost there, and we had probably like 10,000 more to raise, which, is a lot of money, but we were almost there. And I remember she and I were just talking, and someone had said to her, Jane, just do it. And I wish that I had written down the verse. I'm sorry I didn't, but there's a story. I can't remember if it was Joshua or it was when the Red Sea was parting, somewhere in that part of the Old Testament. In those stories, God had asked one of them to take us to step out into the water, and then he would part parted, and he was going to perform a miracle.
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember
I think that's
it.
Joshua.
It was Joshua. Okay, perfect. So it was Joshua.
I think so. I'll look it up.
I think it was two. And he stepped out and the sea parted and he was able to go through, and God did that. And someone had shared that with Jane, and she and I looked at each other and we're like, we got to go. We got to step out. We got to do this. And we both were like, oh my gosh, we got to do this. Like, we got to do it. It was so exciting. And it made sense. And we did it. We stepped out and we didn't have the full 75, and we didn't have a single staff person hired. And we didn't even have a mom. We weren't even really sure, like, where do we even find a mom? And we stepped out, and the last 10 came in. This woman had it's like, I don't even know how much time we have. I don't want to run over, but Jane met this woman at her work, and she walked in. Jane has been 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and so she got to work early and had to meet with this woman, and she wasn't really part of their team. And I know I'm going to butcher this story, so I'm sorry, Jane, if you listen. But she walked into her office and they started, chatting about work stuff, and then Jane had made a comment about, like, oh, I get up at 4:00 in the morning. And she's like, why are you getting up at 4:00 in the morning? That's crazy. And she's like, well, I get up, I have my quiet time, I sit with the Lord. And, she kind of shared a little bit about that. And then somewhere in the conversation, she kind of shared a little bit about along the way. And this particular woman stood up and shut the door. And she's like, well, what I'm going to talk about is like kind of off the record. And she had said, when I got this job, I kind of behaved badly. And, I was supposed to get this money and then I didn't. And then, there was kind of back and forth and negotiating and different things like that. And she's like, well, I finally got the raise and the money, and I got, the promotion I was promised, and I behaved kind of badly. And with this particular money, I had promised God that I was going to give it back to wherever he wanted, whatever charity or whatever work is out there. And she's like, when you walked in the door, I knew that you and the money were somehow going to all like work together. And essentially she helped push us over that last couple bit. And it was just like an incredible story, because Jane's in there talking like pharmaceutical stuff, and and it turns out this one was a single mom or had been the child of a single mom, and just how that all kind of like played together. And it was orchestrated by God. Like, you can't make this stuff up, right? Like, so we can't orchestrate these things the way that this happens either. And so we stepped out in faith. And then I still have staff that we hired in the very beginning that have been going strong, have been loving our moms, have been there. Some of them have gone away to college and come back on their breaks. And we got our first mom, and she took us through the ringer for sure. And we learned about all the things, all the holes that we had in our policies and procedures. And so it was a learning experience. But like, again, it was like, how else do you know unless you go through the fire, right? And come out on the other side. And people have said before, it's like about going through. It's not trying to skirt around or go under or over. You just have to go through. And so, when it comes to like stepping out and trying something that you're scared about or you're fearful about, like, God's a big God. Like, we put him in such a tiny little box. And he like, when I think about how life is infinite out into space and far beyond galaxies and microscopically down, the things that we like to the atom, like things are smaller than that. And like, God orchestrated and created that. Like, that's infinite in both directions. So for you to take a step out and maybe start that business, or witness to somebody, or talk to somebody about your dream, or be vulnerable, or share, like, don't you think God is going to have you and like be there with you and help you? And you have to trust that, like, sometimes really crappy stuff is the best thing that could ever happen to you. Like, I know for me, I didn't want to go through that divorce. I did everything possible. There were nights that I was praying over my Bible. I felt like I was doing witchcraft almost. I know that's ridiculous, but I was like praying Bible verses and laying hands on his clothes and binding it up. And that's how badly I didn't want to get divorced. And yet I got divorced and I had this baby and I walked through this horrible valley of the shadow of death and came out on the other side, and God built just the most, my life is just so much more, not even more amazing. It's different. And it's where he wanted me. And he wanted me in that relationship. I needed to go through that relationship. I needed to be there. I needed to experience the things that I experienced there, because I wouldn't be the director of Along the Way today. I wouldn't be sharing with the women that I get to share with. The staff wouldn't be doing the things that they're doing. Jane and Chris wouldn't have, it would be a different April there. Like, they would have maybe still did it, but I wouldn't be that person there. And I wouldn't be able to have my life changed and shaped. So, like, just do it. Literally, just do it. Like, Nike has it right, you know? So I feel like step out. Just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think, like, there's so many devastating things that could happen on this earth, right? In our lives, or just to us individually. And we have to trust that God has us in it.
Yeah, for sure.
And that he's going to use it for our good and for his glory. And he's so much bigger than all the
right. And we just have so much
little big
fear.
things we struggle with.
We have so much fear of failure. And I think it's when we fail that we learn. And honestly, that's a gift. That's a gift.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's a society thing for us as Americans, that we're supposed to succeed, and succeed is, if you're successful, then that means, your worth is built into that. And so it's so many times you're like so afraid, like, if I fail, then everyone's going to think I'm a failure, and it's going to be tied into who I am. And no, like, when your mom and when you're a little kid and you've made a mistake, you've touched your hand on a hot burner and that hurts you, and you're like, ow, that hurts. Like, okay, you've learned, like, I'm not going to touch hot things, like, if you don't fail, if you don't make mistakes, if you're not curious, like, then what's life going to be about? Like, it's going to be kind of, I don't know, well, I lived a good life, I guess.
Yeah. Right. And that's a choice.
Yeah, of course.
But for those of us who have, like, you know, something burning a hole in our brains in the middle of the night, it's like, oh, maybe I should give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, April, well, this really has gone too fast. But I just want to thank you for sharing your story and, encouraging us that it might not always look pretty, but God is going to use it. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have covered this, but if you could sum it up, how would you say that God has changed you by just doing it?
Oh, wow. I think that God has changed me to be someone who takes a posture of hands wide open. I don't do it right every day. In fact, like I've said before, there are weeks where I'm holding so tightly, I'm white knuckling things. But I have learned that it's not worth it to try to jam square pegs into round holes, and do it in my own strength and my own will and my own way. And so I have to take deep breaths and open my hands again. When I feel myself clenching, I just have to go back to, like, I have to open it. It's yours. I have to open it. It doesn't belong to me. I have to open my hands. You are going to work through this. And I think that doesn't even necessarily go into something that's, if my mom got cancer tomorrow, or if my husband died tomorrow, like, I have to be able to open my hands. I have to be able to, like, I'm not going to fix it. Like, sometimes I can't make it better. Or even with the moms in my program, sometimes I have to just listen. I can't fix it. I can't make it better. And that's definitely a lesson that God has been teaching me over and over again. It's not your responsibility to fix and make everybody okay. You have to let me do it. Let me use you. Like, you can be the instrument, but you got to let me do it. Like, it's like the potter and the clay. I love that story in the Bible where the potter is, like, fighting the clay and throwing water over it and fighting it. And then all of a sudden it, like, releases, and now the potter can take a finger and slide it up and slide it down and turn it into a beautiful bowl, and push it down and turn it into a mug, and push it down and turn it. If we can just yield to the potter's hand, he can turn us into things that we never thought were possible.
If you have ever let your desire to control things keep you from your dream, this was the episode for you. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. It's not that we should all fly by the seat of our pants with no planning whatsoever. I mean, you heard April say that it took them 2 years of building before they launched their nonprofit, and they knew how much money they needed to raise, which is, of course, both prudent and thoughtful. And it tells me that they went into it with eyes wide open about the costs, both physical and the cost to themselves personally. What I'm talking about here is more about your heart. So what are you trying to control that belongs in God's hands, that requires you to trust him? And why aren't you trusting him? Okay, just some thoughts, food for thought, but here are a few of my other takeaways from this conversation with April. Early in the conversation, she talked about asking a lot of questions and hearing again and again that childcare was a great need among women living in poverty. So it wasn't really what they set out to accomplish. They didn't say, hey, we want to start a daycare. But they asked a lot of good questions and then listened to the answers. So I think we can glean from that how important it is to consider the people that you are longing to serve and ask them what would be helpful and actual service to them. If you did so, your dream might just uncover something you never considered. And then number 2, don't get distracted by the shiny things. Yes, a dream is shiny and exciting and often new, but there is a big reason that a new dream is far more attractive than the one that you've already been pursuing, because there's this uphill aspect to going after a dream. She said it. It's hard. You'll have bad days. You might want to quit. I wanted to quit just a month ago, but there's something to be said about keeping that perseverance, about hanging in there and trusting the Lord until he makes it really, really clear that this isn't where he wants you anymore. Don't just give up because something new and fun comes along. And then finally, takeaway number 3, and I kind of heard pieces of this over and over again in a conversation with April, but know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and partner with people who have what you lack. So invite people into your dream and ask for support, ask for contributions. Like they needed to get $75,000. So they needed more than just, a pat on the back, like, hey, you guys are doing good stuff. But surround yourself with people who will help you see when you're attempting to do everything on your own strength instead of resting in the Lord and in his strength. Such good stuff here. I feel like I could have talked to April for hours and hours. Maybe I'll have to have her come back and we'll cover some other topics in the future. But thanks so much for joining us today, for being part of this, listening in and considering how what we've learned here today might apply to you and your dream. And I just want to remind you, and I mentioned it in the conversation with her, but just the theme for the month of February, the thing that I hope that you will hear over and over again in interviews and on social media, and if you're on the email list there as well. But just this concept of your identity in Christ, and because of that you already have great value and worth. So as we delve into this topic of pursuing our God-shaped dreams, like so many of my guests talk about, they begin to wrestle with, am I enough? Can I do this? Do I have what it takes? And last month, the theme was the reminder that you are a daughter of the King. And so because of that, because of who you are in Christ, you have everything you need. You've been given great value and worth. And that is one thing you need to know in order to continue to step forward towards your dream. And I do hope you heard that in this conversation with April, just that sweet reminder that you are God's child and that he has created you with a purpose, for a purpose, and that your identity is secure in him, that your value and worth is secure in who he is, because of who he is and because he loves you and calls you his child. So if you've been around for a little while, you've maybe heard that more than 60 listeners have left reviews for the podcast on iTunes. Thank you so much. That's so awesome. If you haven't left a review, it's super easy. Just go into your podcast app and click on ratings and reviews and share your thoughts about the show. I've got a recent one to share just from last November. It's from a username called Unaltered Grace. And her review is entitled Such a Blessing. She says, Merritt and her guests bless me in so many ways. It's difficult to follow your God-given dream, but it is beyond helpful to hear this gospel-based encouragement week in and week out. And if you are loving the Devoted Dreamers podcast as well, I have 2 simple asks of you today. Number 1, what can you do to help the podcast grow? And number 2, would you consider supporting the podcast with your monthly contribution? So you probably have a friend or friends or a bunch of social media followers who, just like you, have a dream on their hearts and need to hear stories like this one. You've heard me say it before, I don't have a marketing department, so your friend who needs the show probably needs to hear it from you. I mean, I can get the word out to my circles, to the people that follow me, but it's your voice, your words, your Instagram stories, your posts everywhere on the internet that help us spread the word about the podcast and get this message into the earbuds of the women who need to hear it. So if something strikes you about an episode, this one or another that you've heard, would you take a minute, be part of my marketing team this week? You can even use my Instagram stories to share on yours. That cute little arrow image in stories will allow you to share that specifically with anybody that you like. And I'm pretty sure it allows you to share it broadly on your own stories. So I post there every week with quotes and verses and images that are super easy to share about each episode. I do that on Wednesdays, so keep an eye out for that. So help me get the word out, and let's tell more friends about what it means to walk in faith toward our God-shaped dreams. And then option number 2. It's possible you've never heard me talk about this, how this whole podcast thing happens. I mean, I've talked about it in the last couple episodes, but if you're just tuning in now, I have this incredible editor who makes each episode possible to be delivered to your earbuds. But beyond that, I have an incredible group of patrons, a small group right now, women and men who give a little bit from their monthly paychecks to support my work. It was just a year ago that I launched a Patreon page, which, if you've never heard of that, it's this really cool way that creatives get paid for their work by the people who consume the content. So having this and having these patrons has been such a sweet reminder every month. I'm so grateful to each person who makes that contribution. And I want to shout out, I try to do this once a month, to the ladies who give at the $20 or higher level, my friend Bree Uton, Cheryl McGrath, Elizabeth Henry, and Jane Springer. They've all been super consistent and given in a way that just really enables me to do this work on a continuing basis. And you can join in the fun too. I mean, giving levels start at just $2 a month and they go up to $25. So there's more information at patreon.com/Devoted Dreamers podcast. And you spell that Patreon, kind of a funny word. But you can learn more about what these funds do for me and the show. As an example, patrons of the show have gotten early access to podcast episodes in the past. I hope to do more of that in the future. You also could get some promotion-free social media images with guest quotes. So if you're looking for stuff that's inspirational to share on your Instagram, I'll send those your way. And then I'm also beginning to share some products and services via my website store, and patrons of the show can look forward to getting discounts on those a couple times a year. Again, to get started, check it out at patreon.com/Devoted Dreamers podcast. Come on over to the Devoted Dreamers Facebook group and connect with some other dreamers. Join us by answering just a few questions. I'll accept your request, and then you can share your thoughts about this week's show and join in the conversations happening there. Would love to have you in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group. You will find the show notes for this episode at merrittonsa.com/podcast/108. There you can connect with April Matt and review the details about that fun little giveaway for their event coming up later this month. And then find a link to the Along the Way website where you can learn more about their work supporting single moms. That is all I have for today. Thank you again so much for joining me in this conversation. And wherever you are with your God-shaped dreams, may you have the courage to take one step toward their realization today. I'll see you next week.
Whoa.